Hello guys, in this video I'm going to be talking about some frugal living tips whilst I cook. I know some of you guys like the full cooking vlog, so I'm going to try and do this at least once a week. I generally do film most of my cooking videos on the weekend because I have more time to film then. So I've got some pork mince and some spring onions, which I got from the freezer. Normally when I buy spring onions, I don't use it all within that week, so I kind of chop them up, put them in the freezer before they go off. So that's another frugal tip that I do. So I get my pork mince from Aldi because it's the cheapest out of all of the supermarkets that are near me. I think it's $3.99 for 500 grams. And for this particular recipe, I only used half of that, which means I've got 250 grams of pork mince in there. I've tossed in some spring onions and I'm going to mince up some garlic as well. Sauce wise, we'll go through that in a little bit more detail later on. And as you can see, the veggie of choice this week is eggplant. Now, whilst I do that, I just wanted to talk about the Australian rental crisis that's going on at the moment. I know a lot of people are struggling to find a home. I would love to know how many of you guys in the audience are renting versus you already own a property and are currently paying a mortgage. I know a lot of apartments in the city, Sydney CBD, it's about $650 roughly, from my experience, anyways, for a one bedroom apartment. And if you live in Sydney, you know you've got a tiny little cage basically, and you've got to pay $600 to $650 a week for rent. If you're renting anywhere in the country, please let me know how much you're paying for rent and what state you're based in. Also, with the housing crisis in Australia at the moment and the cost of living, I mean, going to the supermarket alone is costing so many Australians so much money just to eat. If you have a family member you can maybe share accommodation with, that would be a frugal living tip that I would suggest, especially if you're really young and you haven't even moved out of home yet. I highly suggest you stay at home as long as you can because rent is crazy expensive and even going to the grocery shop is very expensive. It's not as easy as it was maybe 5 years ago to move out on your own. I saw on the news not too long ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, where a real estate agent had one apartment listing in Sydney CBD and there were over 100 people who wanted to view the property. That is crazy. That just shows that there's a housing shortage in Australia as a whole, not just Sydney. I've also been seeing a reoccurring theme on the news in regards to people being worried about being homeless because they can't find rental properties or they can't afford to buy a home. So they're obviously forced to rent, and there's a shortage in the rental market. I have even watched videos in America where a lot of people are turning to the idea of van life instead of renting so they can save money on renting, because I think the cost of living in America is also getting sky high. But obviously, people do need to consider the cost of buying a van, and then you've got to pay for renovations to make sure it's livable in. You've got to pay for all of these insurances and the fuel to travel. So, even van life, there's quite a bit to think about because the cost of living in a van is going to be a lot more expensive than most people think. Because I think the first idea is living in a van is cheaper because you don't have to pay for rent, but there's a lot of other things you will need to consider as well. I hear fuel just to drive the van around is a lot, and maintenancing. So you've got to change the tires more often because you're actually living in the vehicle and driving it around more often than just say a normal car that you park at home. Also, I wanted to mention a lot of van lifers don't have a shower in their van, so they'll have to pay for a gym membership so they can shower there. Or even some van lifers don't have a kitchen in their van, so they're often spending more money to buy takeout food. So these are the things that people will need to consider before just opting out and turning to van life. So guys, I just wanted to mention I normally put a teaspoon of the meat filling on a plate, smear it out so it's nice and flat, then chuck it in the microwave, let it cook. That way I can taste test it. As you can see, I'm adding more seasonings here and there. Doing that little cooking method just allows me to taste the filling and adjust accordingly. If you don't want to do the microwave method, you can easily just pan fry a little spoonful of the filling on a pot or pan. Make sure the meat's cooked before you're tasting it, obviously, and then adjust accordingly. And obviously make sure you're washing your hands in between touching the raw meat and the cooked meat. I do a lot of this off camera because whatever you guys see, the footage is often sped up or cropped out. So once you've taste tested the cooked filling and you're happy with it, then just pick a vegetable of choice, and then you're going to use the pork mince mixture to stuff the veggies. I've done this with cabbage before, which I absolutely love. This week, eggplant was much more affordable than cabbage, so that's what I'm going to be using. So I'm just cutting the eggplant in relatively thin rounds, and then I'll start to sandwich the meat in between the two slices. So I'm going to show you guys what I mean in the next couple of clips. And just wanted to remind you guys, you can do this with whatever vegetable you like. You can do it with capsicum, cabbage. You can probably even do this with tofu skins that you can find at your local Asian grocer. So as you can see, depending on the size of your eggplant, just spoon in a little bit of the pork mince mixture, then sandwich the other slice of the eggplant. You can scrape off the excess if there's any. For the moment, I'm just going to fill all of these eggplant slices, then I will start to cook them. Now, just bear in mind, eggplant generally absorbs a lot of oil, so I tend to not cook them in oil very often. I just put a little bit of oil down the bottom of the pan so it doesn't stick, and then I add in water, basically just to help the eggplant and the pork mince cook. Because it doesn't matter how much oil you put in, the eggplant's probably going to absorb majority of it. But I'll show you guys all of that in the next couple of clips. The reason why I really love eating this meal is because 1, it's super tasty, 2, it's relatively simple, and 3, I feel like I'm eating more veggies when I eat this type of meal because I'm not having this with any carbs, and you can eat as much or as little as you like because it's basically just vegetable and protein, so it makes me feel good. If you want, you can use this filling for like little wonton wrappers as well if you like. I've just chosen to do it with veggies because I just find it's a healthier alternative and it helps me consume more of my veggie intake. Also, I wanted to mention, if you get firm tofu, or you can even try it with, I guess, the medium tofu, you can dig a little hole in the middle of the tofu squares and then stuff it with this meat mixture and braise the tofu. That's really nice as well. I've had that at one of the vegetarian shops, but they used a vegetarian filling instead, obviously. But I haven't done meat stuffed tofu at home myself before. So as you can see, I've probably got maybe a teaspoon of olive oil down the bottom of the pan, chucked my eggplants in, letting it cook a little, see it's browning a little. And when the pan's really hot, I'm going to add in some hot water, let it steam. As you can see, the water's bubbling. Then I'm going to toss the lid on and it should steam and cook through. And at the end, I plate it up and drizzle on a little bit of that ABC glaze, and that's the finished product. I hope you guys enjoyed this video.